They trapped 2 duendes, and this is what they did to them in Veracruz. A very long time ago, there was a girl named Cristina who had just gotten married. At the time, the man that Cristina married was like some sort of captain in this town, so she had to move to the town where they were in. And unfortunately, she explains that the town was like surrounded by nothing. Like, it was just the town and nothingness for like a long time. With time, she said that weird things started happening to Cristina. She would end up waking up in the middle of the night because she would feel a lot of pressure on her chest, almost like if something was on her. When this would happen to her, she couldn't move, she couldn't scream, she couldn't like do anything. She honestly tried to tell herself that she was just having really bad nightmares, even though she knew that they were not nightmares or dreams. She was fully awake. So months would pass, and then things got even stranger because now she was waking up with like a piece of her hair being braided. At first she was thinking like, what if I did this to myself in my sleep? But then the braids would continue to be there every single morning, and not just that, but they became more tighter, more entangled, to the point where she had to work really hard to like take that braid off of her hair. A little while after that, they actually found out that she was pregnant, and everybody in her family was really happy. Her and her husband was so happy about them having their first baby. However, those braids on her hair didn't stop appearing every single morning when she would wake up. By this point, she was waking up with 1 or 2 or even 3 braids in her hair, and the weird thing was that now anytime she would try to undo those braids, she would get like really bad headaches in the process. By this point, she had given birth to a really beautiful baby girl, and everybody in the family was so excited about her. Everything seemed to go back to normal until one day when Cristina was out in her yard. She was washing clothes and hanging it, and this is the moment that changed her life forever. That's when she went inside of her house to check in on the baby. The baby was in the crib, and when she looked in the crib, the baby was nowhere to be found. She started screaming. She was desperately trying to find her child. She couldn't find her anywhere. She ends up calling her husband, calling the neighbors, and no one could find this baby. Not only did they go house by house, they went into like the farmland, they went everywhere, every corner, and this baby was never found. They were never able to find this baby, and with time, a lot of resentment grew, and the husband was blaming her for losing the child, being that she was the one that was taking care of her. By this point, the arguments were really bad, and they decided to get a divorce, and she ends up moving back in with her parents. Cristina's heart was broken. Not only did she lose her baby girl, but now she's going through a divorce, and just when she was finally getting her life back together as normal as she could, it had been like a year or 2 that have passed, she ends up falling in love again. She's so in love with this guy that she marries him, and she ends up moving in with him as well. Everything was going good with her second husband until things started feeling a little too weird, and she finds out that she is pregnant again. At this point, she's living with her husband and her mother-in-law, and she should be happy because she's pregnant, but the mother-in-law would see that she looked really worried, that she looked really scared, and she decided to ask her why she was so scared if she should be so happy that she was pregnant. Cristina, in between tears, obviously tells her everything that happened, you know, the disappearance of her daughter, you know, the dreams that she would have, all these weird things that were happening, and obviously that she is scared that it might happen again to this baby. Her mother-in-law looked at her really seriously and said, hey, you know that what happened to you isn't normal, and it kind of sounds like you have duendes around you, and maybe they marked you. They think that you belong to them, and if you do nothing about it, they may take away the second baby as well. Obviously, Cristina is now scared and worried, and she's like, well, what can we do about it? And the mother-in-law is like, let's set up a trap. I like that lady. I like her. The mother-in-law was like, you need to promise me one thing. When we set the trap up and you're there at night, do not turn and look for nothing in the world. We need this plan to work, and we need to make sure we get rid of them. And she's like, okay, I promise you. So the mother-in-law is like, we need 3 things. We need a new stack of cards, we need a cowboy hat, and we need a part of an anise plant. I don't know what that is. If I find it, I'll put it on the screen right here. That very night, after getting those 3 things, they ended up placing these things in the very corner of the bedroom. The mother-in-law sat in the corner of the bed, just very quietly, very still, with a piece of a branch of anise, but it was blessed. She was about to whoop somebody's ass. Anyways, the daughter-in-law was laying in bed very still, pretending to be asleep. By this point, it was midnight, and that is when they started to hear something strange in the bedroom. That it looked like something was being moved, and that it sounded like children laughing. The mother-in-law, sitting there without moving, is witnessing 2 little deformed men with pointy hats fighting over that cup that they had placed in the corner of the room. It was definitely the duendes, and in that very moment, the mother-in-law screams out loud, "Ahora hija, ahora, ahora," which means now daughter, now. Cristina without any hesitation, without thinking twice about what the fuck she was about to do, jumps out of bed. The mother-in-law does too, and they both start beating these duendes with those blessed branches of anise over and over again. They explain that as they're hitting them with these branches, you know that shit hurts, because if you have a Mexican mom, at one point you probably hit with a branch, okay? Yeah. She explains that they were screaming in agony, that it almost sounded like animal noises, and they were crying out loud, getting beat the fuck up. By this point, Cristina had no control. She was beating them up, and she in the middle of her like hitting them, she was screaming at them, "Leave me alone, you're not gonna take away my child, you're not gonna take this child away from me." By this point, they had beaten these duendes up to the point where they had managed to like walk from the bedroom to where the door is, and then they got lost in like the farmland and bushes and stuff. After that night, when the duendes disappeared, the ranch felt a silence that it hadn't been felt before, and after this, there was no more braids in her hair. The duendes never came back. Cristina was actually able to continue her life without being bothered, and she ended up having a lot more children than the one she had. However, as you might imagine, she still had to live with the pain of that very first baby girl being missing and her not being able to do about it. Even on her deathbed, that was the only thing that she could think about. And by deathbed, I mean she died of old age. She didn't just like die right after that. No, she got to live her life and have all these kids, but unfortunately, when she was in bed, you know, about to pass away, that was the only thing that she was able to talk about, and she just really wanted to know where that little baby girl was. She was wondering if the duendes maybe still had her child, and if they were at the very least taking care of that baby girl.
What would you do if every time you stayed over at your grandmother's house growing up, something in the top bunk above you tried on a different face and asked you if you liked it better? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who says that they were an only child, but there was always something sleeping above her. When I was little, I stayed at my grandmother's house all the time. She had this spare room at the end of the hallway with an old wooden bunk bed in it. I always slept in the bottom bunk. I was an only child and nobody ever slept on the top. At first, I liked that room. During the day, it felt normal, but at night, it changed. The first time it happened, I was 7. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard the mattress above me shift. Not the frame creaking. I mean, actual weight moving around on the top bunk like somebody had rolled over. I called for my grandma and she came in, turned the lamp on, and of course, there was nobody there. She told me old beds make sounds at night. But then it happened again a few months later. This time I heard breathing above me first, slow and wet, and then something lowered over the edge of the top bunk. At first, I thought it was a woman's face, but the longer I looked at it, the less human it seemed. The eyes were too open, the mouth hung wrong, and the skin looked too still. It looked at me and whispered, "Don't fall asleep yet." And then it screamed. Nobody else ever heard that scream. That was the worst part. My grandma would come running in every time, but the room was empty, and I would be the only one shaking and crying because the sound felt like it had gone straight through my skull. And every time I stayed there after that, it had a different face. That's what made it so much worse. One night it looked like an old man with tiny teeth and wet lips. And one night it looked like a little girl, except her eyes looked too old for her face. And one night it had lipstick smeared too far past the mouth and smiled before the rest of the face caught up. It always started the same. The top bunk would shift, and then a face would lower into the view upside down. And then it would whisper, "Don't fall asleep yet." Sometimes it would ask me things too. "How do you like this one? Do you want a prettier one? You didn't like the last one." And then the scream would come. The worst face I ever saw was when I was 10. That night I woke up and saw fingers first. They were long and pale fingers curling over the edge of the top bunk. And then a face lowered down, upside down. Its mouth was already open. It had long, sharp teeth, and way too many of them. and blood was running up the face because the head was upside down. Thin, dark lines from the mouth into the hairline, and the eyes were huge, completely black. It smiled wider and whispered, "Is this face better?" And then it screamed so hard, I rolled out of bed and hit the floor. The worst night of all came years later when I was 14. I woke up and the top bunk was empty. For 1 second, I felt relieved. And then I looked towards the corner of the room. There was this tall figure standing there, bent wrong and too thin, arms too long, and just standing in the corner watching me. And then it moved fast. It turned and crawled up the bunk bed ladder so quickly it barely made a sound. The top mattress took weight right after, hard enough to shake the whole frame. And then a new face lowered down over the edge and whispered, "Look at me before I scream." That was the last night I ever slept in that room. Years later, after my grandma died, my mom and I had to clean the house out. When the men helping us moved the bunk bed, they found things hidden under the top mattress. Hair and little buttons, a child's barrette, and 3 yellow teeth. Tiny cutout school pictures with the faces scratched away. We got rid of that bed the same day, but every once in a while, if I'm tired enough, I still wake up in the middle of the night already knowing what I'm about to hear. The mattress above me shifting. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, cause you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, oh yeah. Hi, bestie, I missed you. You know it's time to take a break, right? So go get your snack and go get your gardening essentials, all right? Okay, for the sake of the story, let's call this guy Jared. This is the story that happened when Jared was back in his home country. So Jared was probably about like 15 years old when this happened. But when he, damn. I'm sorry, y'all. I slept on my shoulder and now I can't lift this arm and I be forgetting. So when he was about 15 years old, his grandmother passed away. Now his grandma was a pretty successful woman, you know. His grandma had 8 kids, which all of them, grew up, had different families. And his grandma owned a lot of land, a lot of animals. Again, she was pretty successful. So when she passed away, there was a lot of things to be split. Mind you, she had 8 kids, right? Grandma, before she passed away, because she was sick and she knew that that time was coming, she decided that she was going to give all the land to Jared's father. And she made that very clear. She had the whole family come together and told everyone who would get what, And everybody agreed, or so they thought. But as soon as Grandma passed away, some people wanted to claim more things that they were supposed to get. And of course, almost everybody wanted a piece of land. But the piece of land was supposed to go to Jared's dad. Now, Jared's dad is a pretty successful man himself. And so everybody felt like, because he's already successful, he shouldn't even be having the land. But Jared is the only person out of his siblings to make something of himself. Everybody else just wanted to, be given things, Hence why Grandma chose Jared to have all the land. Boom, Grandma passes away, they have the funeral, everything goes well, until it doesn't, because now siblings wanted to start fights with Jared's dad because they wanted that land. But Jared's dad is like, bro, no, Grandma gave this to me, and I'm the only one of us that's actually working. I went to school, I stayed in school, I graduated, I have a great career. All you guys are doing is making babies. So he stood on business. He was like, no, y'all are not gonna have this land. And ooh, did they not like that. So of course they resorted to magic. So the first thing that happened was, one day Jared and his wife, they were driving. They were actually on the way to pick up Jared from school. And so as they're driving, everything is going normal, right? All of a sudden, Jared, who was driving, Jared wasn't driving, Jared's dad was driving. He all of a sudden looked like he's seen a ghost. He starts screaming and swerves the car, which ended up in them getting into a really bad car accident. The car rolled about 5 times. Both survive. However, the wife had to recover for like a really long time. But from Jared's dad, let's give him a name. Let's call him Steven. So Steven, from his perspective, he's driving, right? And all of a sudden, there's this truck driving right towards him at full speeds. So he tries to swerve out the way and not hit the truck, which then ended up in the accident. From Steven's wife's point of view, there was no truck. There was nothing in front of them. Only Steven saw that truck. And so when the wife ended up, after the whole accident and stuff, and they ended up talking about it, Steven Steven told her what he saw, and she told him nothing was there. And so now they kind of already understood what was going on, right? They're like, oh, okay, this is all over this land. So they decided to go to somebody to get some protection put on them. And so when they got to the person to put a protection on them, the person told them, you don't even need it. Like, I could really take your money right now and do some fake protection, but honestly, your grandma already had you. Like, she already figured that the kids was gonna do that. She already, before she passed away, made sure that you guys would be protected. Steven is like, okay. This kind of already confirms that y'all really trying to take me out. If grandma had to put protection on me, she's already knowing. But y'all, my siblings, like, I never expected this from y'all. So boom, the second thing that happened. Now we're back to Jared. For about 3 whole months, Jared started hearing voices. And those voices will tell him to do very, very bad things. At first, it started off small, like jump off the chair, take a couple dollars out of dad's wallet. At first, like, Jared just thought, these were intrusive thoughts. Sometimes he would give in to them, sometimes he wouldn't. However, they were getting darker and darker and darker. Now, at the time, Jared knew what was going on within the family, but he didn't know too much, so he didn't really relate that to what was going on. Until one night, and of course, it's 3 a.m, Jared wakes up, and the voices have now turned into a figure. And the figure, he could see the figure. And the figure is telling him to go harm his parents. And when I mean harm, I mean unalive. So he's like, no, I don't want to harm my parents. And the voices start telling him that, well, your parents are going to harm you. They're actually planning on taking you out, so you should get them first. Now, Jared does not believe this, but there is a small part of him that he feels like he has no control over that wants to go do it. And so that worries him. So he starts crying and he runs to his parents' room in tears, and he finally tells them about the voices. And now the voice turned into a figure, and how he's been stealing out of their wallet and stuff like that, and it's all because of the voices. So that same night, they called the person that they went to the first time for the protection. And they told the person what was going on. And they were like, yo, I thought you told us that grandma had us. Like, but now Jared is like, he's hearing voices, and the voices are telling him to unalive us. And the person told them, you still have nothing to worry about because Jared came to you and told you, right? Usually, the way that it goes is one night he would have just woke up and took y'all out, and y'all would have never knew. They're like, but what can we do? Because he feels like it's getting worse. The guy's like, hey, you can bring him right now. Like, I'll work something on him, but trust me, you guys are good. But to relieve you guys, bring him right now. And so that same night, they pack up the car, they go over to the man's house. I'm not gonna give any details because y'all like to try stuff, but basically he cleanses Jared and all of that. And of course, after that night, voices are gone, everything's fine. Everything's fine until the next morning. Steven gets a phone call from 2 of his siblings cussing him out. Just cussing him out. And they're cussing him out about nothing. So he's already knowing y'all mad because what y'all trying is not working. In the midst of all of this, Steven had been working on moving his family abroad because of all of this that was going on. And of course, he didn't tell a soul. He didn't even tell his own family he was working on that. He had already filed for them and everything with his business, but his job. So over like the next month, a lot was happening. Like, they were getting constantly attacked, but none of it was working. It was like they were getting attacked and it was like bouncing off of them, which pisses them off even more. And so they decided ultimately they're just going to do the work themselves. They just have to do it themselves because they're trying magic, but that's not working. So they got to take them out themselves. Boom. Steven had already told some of his coworkers at work about what was going on and stuff. And, his job was helping him with moving abroad. So he spoke to some of his closest coworkers and say, hey, when me and my family leave, please watch over our house and that land. I give you full permission to bring the police, whatever it is that you need to do. So there's a date that's finalized. Tickets are booked. They're moving abroad. And he doesn't tell them until 2 days before they move abroad, meaning like his family. So he tells Jared and his wife that in 2 days from now, we're leaving. They're super happy because, quite frankly, they're sick of all of this. So the date comes, they travel, they make it to the United States, safe and sound. But as soon as he touches down, he gets off that plane and he finally gets signals. He sees a whole lot of missed calls from his coworker that, he trusted to check on his house and stuff like that. He calls him back. And come to find out, the day that they traveled was the day they were supposed to be taken out. Because the coworker who took them to the airport, after he dropped them off, something told him to go back to the house and, check on the house or whatever. He doesn't know, but something is telling him to do it. So he goes back to check on the house only to see his siblings outside with machetes, with batons, ready to take that entire family out. His own siblings. So they know the coworker. So when they saw the coworker, they tried to play it off and say that, the family stole from them and stuff like that. And the coworker just played along like, oh my gosh, they did that. I can't believe they would do such things like that. They seem like such good people. I'm almost reaching the 10-minute limit, so I'm gonna try to make it fast. The siblings ask him is he at work? Where can we find him? And so he drops the news and tells them, actually, I just took them to the airport. They went to the United States. They didn't tell you guys? And I tell you, they look like they seen a ghost. Not only that, they were so mad. Fumes was coming out of their ears. After they moved, Jared didn't hear too much about it, except those siblings started passing away one by one every year. Okay, time's up. Let me know what you ate.
I received a scary story submission a few weeks ago and it really got me. Mainly because the thing discussed in this story I have had a fear of for the longest time, and I honestly thought that I was alone in it. I never thought I would hear somebody talk about this thing in this context, so please let me know if you also have a fear of this thing. I woke up one night at around 3 a.m. because I could hear somebody breathing heavily beside my bed. At first I thought my little brother had come into my room again, and I tried to roll over to tell him to get out, but my body wouldn't move. My chest locked instantly with panic, and I knew immediately I was having sleep paralysis. I'd experienced it all before. Pressure on your chest, shadow in the corner, feeling watched. I knew the logic of it. Your brain wakes before your body does, and hallucinations happen. But this felt different, because the breathing stopped the second I realized I was awake. My room went completely silent. Then something shifted beside my bed, but I was paralyzed and I could only move my eyes. My curtains were open just enough for some moonlight to illuminate my room, and as soon as I moved my eyes to look beside me, I saw a man. Except he wasn't a shadow, he was a man. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothing. I kept trying to make out a face, and as my eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, my stomach dropped. I recognized him instantly. It was him, the man that people supposedly see in their dreams all around the world. I remember trying to tell myself it was just because I'd seen images of him before, and my brain was recycling it. That explanation lasted maybe 3 seconds, because he started leaning in closer to me. I tried to scream, but of course, nothing came out. He put his face right in mine, and his smile widened. Then he said, in what I can only describe as the most terrifying and distorted voice I have ever heard, "You're not dreaming." Only then was I able to scream, and I launched myself up out of my bed. Of course, my room was empty. I stayed awake for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told myself it was just a bad paralysis episode. I even laughed about it later since I'd never heard of someone seeing him during sleep paralysis. But then, things started happening when I wasn't even asleep. It felt like I started seeing him everywhere. I'd see characters on TV that slightly resembled him, or I would notice his features on other people when I was out in public. He wouldn't leave my head. One night, I was feeling particularly anxious and decided to sleep with my TV on. As I went to turn it on though, I could have sworn I saw him in the reflection of the black TV screen sitting in my bed next to me. As soon as I looked directly though, he was gone. I honestly thought that this experience had just really messed me up and I needed a few days before I could fully forget about it and move on. A couple weeks passed and it was easier for me to sleep now. I really was beginning to move past it and the memory didn't seem so scary anymore, but that was short-lived. I woke up again in the middle of the night and instantly had this sinking feeling of dread. I was on my side this time, but again, I couldn't move. It wasn't long before I heard the same distorted voice shout directly in my ear, "Stop dreaming about me." I shot up out of bed once again and, of course, found my room empty. My ear actually ached and was ringing from how loud it was. I didn't see him again until a few months later. I was home alone one night and had just gotten home from a full morning of classes and an 8-hour shift at work. I was exhausted. I was laying on the couch in the living room watching TV and started to doze off at some point. I remember waking up to the volume on the TV progressively getting louder. I thought I was laying on the remote or something, so I quickly sat up to turn the volume back down. And there he was, sitting on the other couch. He wasn't smiling this time, he was completely straight-faced. Before I could properly react, he looked right at me and said, "You keep waking up," before I could get close enough. And once again, I screamed and woke myself up. The TV was at its normal volume and the house was still empty. This happened to me about a month ago. I don't know why I keep seeing him and I don't know what to do. All I do know is that I'll be seeing him again and I'm terrified.
One of the most horrifying stories to ever happen on the Appalachian Trail. This is about 6-year-old Dennis Martin, who went missing right next to his family, and the only thing they ever found was his socks and shoes. Okay, so if you have small children, you might not want to watch this one because it can be very triggering, because there is some supernatural elements. There's a possible serial killer involved in this. It is a truly traumatizing story for anyone. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I just could not imagine what this family went through, okay, let alone Dennis Martin, who to this day has never been found. No part of his body has ever been found. So the story happens in Spencefield. It's an area of the Appalachian Trail, specifically in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee. It's in East Tennessee. Okay, Dennis Martin, 6-year-old little boy, his whole family and a family friend, their family was spending the night at this campsite all together, okay? They had spent a couple of days there at this point already. They were spending the weekend there entirely. But during the day, he went missing in broad daylight. They were all playing a game of hide and go seek. And because Dennis was only 6 years old, his dad had been watching, him hide. Like, so anytime he would hide, the dad would watch where he went, and then the other kids would try to find him. And this was this isn't out in the middle of nowhere. This is on a actual, Campgrounds of America, campground. Like, it's a populated area with very clearly marked trails and mowed down areas. So the dad watches Dennis Martin go behind a tree. And because the dad's not participating in the game, it's just the kids playing hide and go seek in the daylight, okay, in a populated area. So he watches Dennis Martin go behind a tree, and the tree was only 30 to 40 feet from the dad, so not very far. And he watches his son go behind this tree. Now, they're playing hide and go seek for a few minutes, this round of it, and he had seen his son peek out behind the tree multiple times and giggling and laughing. And then about a minute went by. Now, this is very important because only roughly about a minute passes before one of the kids goes and checks behind that tree, and the dad's laughing, thinking oh, they found little Dennis. And the kid just keeps going and just starts looking behind other trees and other areas. And the dad was very confused because he's like, why didn't he find Dennis? So the dad goes behind the tree, and Dennis is gone. He is gone. The last image that dad had of his son was him peeking and giggling behind that tree, because they never found a trace of him besides some socks and shoes that have never truly been confirmed to be Dennis's. They just matched the description of Dennis's shoes and socks that he was wearing, but this was found miles away from the campsite. So they aren't even 100% sure if they found his socks and shoes. Now, here's where it gets wild. I mean, literally within minutes, this is one of the biggest search rescue parties that has ever happened in national park history, because national parks are notorious for not wanting to do these huge big group search efforts right away. But this was different. They did. They wanted to do it immediately. 1,400 people searched for this boy that day. And a lot of them were actually called in from the U.S. Army Reserves and even members of the Green Berets. The most professional trackers in the world were in on this search. And no one could find a single trace of this boy. If you watched our other video about the boy that went missing, and then immediately after a freak storm came in that wasn't on the radars, the exact same thing happened now. So hours after he was missing, a freak storm came in, down poured the rain. It slowed down search efforts. It would obviously erase tons of tracks and evidence and everything else, scents for the dogs to try to find. But that's the other thing. They got the dogs on this almost immediately, and it was like Dennis Martin had never been there at all. They could not find any trace of this boy, and they had other clothes for the dogs to sniff, so a perfect reference. Everybody saw Dennis there with the family. The family was not suspected of foul play at all because everybody was with the dad. They knew that the dad didn't do anything because his wife, his other friends and families, the other children, they were all with the dad the whole time. Everybody has the same exact story. Not a single detail falters. This family was re-interviewed and re-interviewed and re-interviewed for years, and not a single detail has ever changed. Not a single bit of it. Now, if you guys want to look more into this, like I said, it's Dennis Miller. David Plius does a great job of the missing 411, but this case stands out because it is so chilling. A lot of people have suspected, you know, you can hear about mountain lions grabbing people and running away. There was a famous case where a little girl got bit by a mountain lion and drugged 70 feet within a matter of seconds. But here's the thing, with that case, there was blood. The girl screamed. There was a commotion. There was signs of like a drag trail. There was none of this. And you got to remember, this wasn't like they were in the middle of nowhere in the Appalachian Park. This was right in the middle of a populated campground. I mean, there was people behind Dennis. There was people next to Dennis. They were in the middle of playing hide and go seek. If a mountain lion would have grabbed him, there would have been drag marks. There would have been blood. There would have been signs of a struggle. They would have found him, okay? Or at least a sign that something had happened, like an attack. There was nothing, okay? Big cat attacks. I've been attacked before by like one of our bobcats. Even a slight cut from them is extremely bloody. I bled all over the place when he got me in the ear and got me in the chin. There would have been signs, okay? Next thing is bears. Somebody would have noticed a 350-pound, 6-foot-tall bear walking in the middle of their campsite, and then once again, he could have screamed. There would have been signs of a struggle. There'd have been things there, right? The dad didn't see him for a window of about a minute to a minute and a half. Here's where it gets supernatural. The only key witness detail that was heavily interviewed is a family witness. Like 4 people witnessed this. About a mile away from where he went missing, they all described a hairy, big man, and they said he was carrying something over his shoulder. And it looked to be a person that he was carrying over his shoulder. And like, you would think, like, why didn't they report it immediately? They did. They called it in ASAP. And apparently this dude was just trucking through the woods. He was not on the trail. He was trucking through high brush, and he was moving. And they were very scared to say they thought they saw a Bigfoot. If you look at the report, because it's in the police report, they described a large, hairy man, and he was trucking it, they said. Like, he was moving fast. And they said if it wasn't a small person he had over his shoulder, it was a sack of clothes, because they said we've definitely saw clothes, but whatever he was carrying over his shoulder was not moving. Okay? What do you do with that information? And as a dad, knowing your son's missing, and your last images, you saw him peeking up behind a tree, laughing, having a good time. You hear that. And that report came in about 45 minutes to an hour after he was reported missing. And it was only about a mile and a half away from where he went missing, which would be right on track for somebody walking through deep woods. It would take about that long to maneuver a mile if you're tracking through some heavy, heavy brush, okay? Once again, though, if somebody abducted him, why did no one see it? Even if it was a person, Bigfoot, I don't care. Let's just call it a person. How did the hell was that? How did no one see him? Okay, get carried away. The dad even talked about how the tree was barely narrow enough for his son to even hide behind. So if it would have been a grown adult, he should have been able to clearly see them. They even did test and reenactment of the dad standing where he was standing and somebody walking up behind this tree that could have abducted his son. And every time you could see the person in the reenactment, like every time you could see their shoulders, because the tree wasn't big enough to conceal a full-grown man. What do you do with this information? So just remember, the next time you have your kids in the Appalachian region, just be aware. Doesn't matter how relaxed, how peaceful the scenario is, it can turn into a nightmare in literal seconds.
So this girl and her friends played with the Ouija board when they were in prepa, which is like high school here in America. And what happened is crazy. She starts off with saying that if you are gonna play with the Ouija board and you decide to ask the Ouija board something serious, then you better be prepared for the Ouija board to give you a serious answer. So on this occasion, it was her best friend, her best friend's boyfriend, and her best friend's boyfriend's best friend there that night. She was normally home alone a lot on the weekends because her parents worked, and that night they had gone over to her house and they had watched a scary movie. It was really late and the two guys were actually about to leave, but they convinced them to stay there a little longer. They were having such a good night, they were laughing, and it got to a point where the best friend said that they should play with the Ouija board, but none of them had a Ouija board, but the best friend said that she had seen a video on YouTube on how to make one yourself. They all end up watching the video to see how you do it. They made the Ouija board, and 30 minutes later they were already asking the Ouija board some questions. She calls it a cursor, which I think may be like a makeshift planchette. She says that after them asking question after question after question, it would move, but it would answer the same thing every time. It was a specific word, it was a name of a disease, and it didn't matter what they asked this Ouija board, it would spell out the name of this disease over and over again. Because of this, they decided through laughter, but also just a little nervousness, if one of them had that disease. The Ouija board went to no, but in that moment, she said that they all believed that one of them was moving that cursor planchette around, and that maybe they were just pranking them with giving them that same answer over and over again. So they didn't know if it was really the Ouija board or one of them just messing with each other. After the Ouija board had said no, the best friend's boyfriend then asked if anybody in their family maybe has it. After asking that question, the guy's best friend got really upset, and it was at that point where the girl says, I didn't realize how scared he was. He did insist that he didn't want to play the Ouija board anymore, but they all convinced him to play, and honestly, it only seemed that he continued to play because he didn't want them to think that he was a scaredy cat or something like that. If you think you can convince me to play with the Ouija board or peer pressure me into playing with the Ouija board, you got me fucked up. After that, the Ouija board spelled out the word mama, which is mom in Spanish. Obviamente. After that, the guy's best friend stands up, says that he was gonna leave, and he warned them that this wasn't a game anymore. So the girl telling the story and the best friend, which is the guy who asked the question's girlfriend, got really mad at him because they thought that he was messing with his friend and that it wasn't funny, like why did he do that? But he insisted that he wasn't the one moving the Ouija board. After that, his girlfriend was so upset and mad that she decided to go back to that Ouija board, touch it by herself, and she asked, whose mom? Whose mom has this disease? The Ouija board did give a response, and it spelled out T-U, which is tu, which means you in English. The Ouija board said you to the girl who asked the question. After that night, everybody went to their own houses, and she admits that she did feel like that night was just a little too scary, a little too serious and spooky for a group of teenagers. And a few days later, she did receive a phone call. That phone call was from her best friend's mom, and the mom was asking her if she can come over to her house because she had something to talk to her about. When she goes to her best friend's house, she thought the worst because her best friend had a brother, and the brother's best friend was also there. The mom explained that she wanted them to be there for her children when she gave them the bad news. They had discovered that the mom indeed had the disease and that it was in a very advanced stage. They had told her that she only had a few months to live. She explains how she thought to herself that maybe it was just a coincidence, like the Ouija board was not right. However, the mom, she didn't end up living a few months. She did end up passing away 3 weeks after this. She says that her and her best friend never talked about what happened on the Ouija board. They never mentioned anything about what was said. The mom indeed passed away of cancer, which was the word that the Ouija board wouldn't stop spelling out over and over again. Be very careful with what you decide to play with, and above everything, be very careful on what you decide to ask, is how she ends the story.
Welcome back to another episode of Tea After Midnight. I don't know if you guys are ready for the story I'm about to tell you because it is absolutely terrifying. I was in chills and tears by the end of this story. So with that being said, grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story that happened in the Appalachian Mountains. Very good tea tonight. This story comes from Chris. Hey Savannah, my name is Chris, and I just recently found your account when I saw one of your Tea After Midnight videos. I really enjoy listening to them, and I thought I could submit a story that happened to me and my best friend when we were back in high school. This happened in 2005 in the Appalachian Mountains. My friend AJ and I were seniors when this happened, and it's partly the reason why I left the Appalachian Mountains once I graduated.
AJ and I were really into ghost hunting back in the day. We would go to random places near where we lived to find abandoned houses and churches to explore. I just want to say for anyone listening, do not do this. It is extremely dangerous and I wish we never would have done it. I had this camcorder that we brought along with us every time. We thought we would eventually catch something on there, and little did I know, we would be right. One morning at school before class, AJ came and found me and told me he was excited because he found a new place for us to explore after school. I was excited because we had run out of places to explore, so the idea of something new was really cool. After school, AJ met me at my car and told me it was about an 1.5-hour drive. I was really nervous about that because by the time we would get there, it'd be almost dark. But honestly, nothing ever happened to us on other adventures, so I thought it would be fine. On the drive there, I asked AJ where he heard about this place. He told me his brother went there and said it was really creepy and that something supernatural really existed there. We came to a fork in the road and AJ said to take a left. The road ended from pavement to gravel and we started heading deep into the woods. I asked AJ if this looked right and he said yes, his brother said for us to turn left once we hit the fork in the road. We drive for about 15 minutes down this windy dirt road and started to see a white church. This church had seen better days for sure. It was falling apart and just looked haunted. Once we arrive at the front of the church, we see a small hill that has a cemetery on it. We both got out and I grabbed the camcorder and turned it on to start filming. The door to the church was open, so AJ and I walked up the steps and we went in. We looked around and there were a few pews left with some Bibles and everything was covered in thick dust and dirt. At the front of the church there was an altar, and on top of that altar was the skull of an animal that I didn't recognize. It creeped me out and I told AJ to come look. He said that's really disturbing and he didn't know what kind of animal it was either. We then started asking questions as I'm recording to see if we could catch anything. AJ asked if there was anyone there with us, but we didn't hear anything. I then asked if there were any spirits there that would like to make themselves known, to tap or make some sort of noise. We waited a moment and then we heard a small bang on the wall of the church. AJ and I looked at each other. We were freaked out, but also thought it was cool that something had made a noise and that we caught it on camera. We asked a few more questions but didn't hear anything else, so I suggested we go check out the cemetery. We walk out of the church and the sun was almost set. As we were walking up the hill to the cemetery, I feel like we're being watched. AJ looked over at me and said he felt like there were 100 eyes on him. I got chills and I told him I felt the exact same way. As we got to the top of the hill, it flattened out and you could see all the headstones to the graves. It was a fairly large cemetery and the woods surrounded the entire property. I was still recording as we walked between the graves, checking everything out. We asked a few more questions but didn't really hear anything. By this time, it was fully dark. I started to get creeped out because the feeling of being stared at was now more intense than ever. AJ asked if there are any spirits that want to make themselves known, to make a noise. Before he could finish that sentence, there was a blood-curdling scream that rang out from the woods. I started to run down the hill, but AJ stopped me and said, "What if the person needs help?" I told him we would get back to town and call 911 and let them know what we heard. He grabbed the camera from me and started pointing it at the woods to see if he could see anything on it. When he started scanning the wood line with the camera, he stopped directly in front of us, and what we saw was a tall, dark shadow with red eyes staring back at us. We booked it back to the car as fast as we could, jumped in and locked the doors. I went to start the car, but it wouldn't start. I kept trying, but it still wouldn't turn over. I was not about to get out of that car, so we just sat there in complete silence and darkness. I cracked my window a little bit to see if I could hear anything, but all I could hear was my heart beating in my ears. AJ told me it was okay and that we were safe in the car, which oddly calmed me down when in reality, we were not safe in the car at all. I then heard a crack right next to the window, which sounded like a big branch snapping. Then the analog clock on my car came back on, which made me think that we could start the car. I tried turning it over, praying it would start, and it finally did. I pushed the gas pedal and sped out of there as fast as the car would go. We were driving down that windy dirt road again, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, I could see a dark shadow of a person floating behind the car as we were driving. Then it just disappeared. I was freaked out and AJ asked me what I saw, and as I was telling him about the shadow behind the car, we felt something hit the side of the car where AJ was sitting. I wasn't going to stop the car because I was sure whatever just hit the side of the car wasn't going to let us leave. I drove so fast all the way back home, I know, breaking a few laws along the way. We pulled up to my house and we got out and walked over to the side of the car where something had hit it. We stood there in shock after what we saw. Clear as day, there were 2 handprints on AJ's door that were imprinted into the car. These handprints were easily 3 times larger than both mine and AJ's. I tried to wipe it off, but again, these were dents in the car. It couldn't be wiped away. AJ stayed with me that night, and in the morning, I asked my dad to come look at the car after telling him what had happened. My dad, AJ, and myself went to the car, but there were no handprints. AJ and I looked at each other in terror, as we know exactly what we saw the night before. AJ then called his brother and asked him exactly what he saw when he went out to that church. His brother responded, "Why? Did you see old red eyes too?" Ooh, I have literal tears in my eyes. Okay, there's clearly a lot to unpack here. What do you mean, old red eyes? I am actually terrified. I have chills. This is crazy. Clearly AJ's brother saw old red eyes, so why he didn't tell AJ about it before he went, I don't know. Shame on you. But they saw it on camera. Chris sees it in the rearview mirror. What is actually going on? Oh, but then the handprints. Don't forget the handprints. Being there, both of them seeing it, it's dented into the car. Next morning, they look at it, not there. What? Actually, what? So Chris actually responded to my email when I asked him if I could use this story in a TikTok. He said, "Thank you so much for reading this. It's really the most terrifying experience I've ever been through. And I ended up going to college far away from the Appalachian Mountains after I graduated. I actually do not blame you. I would have done the same thing if I'd have seen what y'all seen." I need y'all to let me know in the comments what y'all think this is, because I genuinely have no idea. I've not read anything like this before, but this right here has absolutely unsettled me so bad. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. It does not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. It can be about anything scary that you've experienced. The email's right here. You can email me here, or the email's going to be in the caption of this video as well. But I just want to say thank you so much for all the love, the support that you guys show me every day. You truly mean the world to me, and I want you to know how much I love you. So thank you so much. I do love you. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.